the presentations that we've seen this week, but that allows me to speed up a little bit. I've been reading this book this week, Talk Like Ted. And one of the first things I learned is that the ideal talk is between 15 and 20 minutes, 18 at an average in the TED series. I will never be able to do that, not on any subject. So I'm going to bore you to death, and that is my reward for having the graveyard shift together with Hans or Mark, who's after me. So let's go ahead and give you a pleasant Friday afternoon. A little introduction about where I come from. I work for NATO. NATO, a political military organization, 28 member nations, a whole lot of partner nations, and yes, even Russia is a partner nation, and yes, even Ukraine is a partner nation. Don't ask me about how we deal with that at this moment. I have nothing to do with that. I'm somewhere at the bottom of the food chain. These are things that go up in high places. What is important is that you understand that the major processes in NATO are about consultation, which is talking at a political level, and about running operations, running missions, organizing a military force to respond to threats and needs in the world, and protecting the global commons. The way that military talk to each other and arrange their business is called command and control. So command is more like giving directions to forces, control is managing your resources and getting the work done. So in NATO you have consultation, command and control, and that is abbreviated as C3. And that will come back in the rest of my briefing, so that is important to remember. C3 is the area of interest that we're working with. Roughly, NATO organizations, I picked this up from the NATO website. You see that there is member countries. The countries are in the lead, not the Secretary General. He has nothing to say. He's just a mailbox and doing what 28 nations want. There is a whole political organization with ambassadors and diplomats, and there is a military organization. It's a lot smaller than the political side, by the way. And in the political organization, there are a couple of high-brass generals and admirals running business in Brussels, and under there is a military structure with a command that runs the operations and a command that runs the transformation. And transformation is where I'm from. So this is an artist's impression of the building. Note that the Dutch flag is upside down. But it looks like how my building will look after they finish the latest extension. But it's located in Norfolk, Virginia, so although I'm from the Netherlands, I didn't have to fly all the way over the ocean to get here. And likely I will attend Semantic Media Wiki conferences in the North Americas rather than in Europe. We started to work with Wiki on 11 October 2005. Why? NATO has all kinds of software, has all kinds of networks, different security levels, different solutions, and the information portals that we had available in those days didn't allow us to collaborate with people outside of the NATO organization. Not with industry, not with academia, and even not with people who were working for nations at a civilian or military level. So we were looking for a different solution, a collaboration platform that was easy to access and easy to edit, easy to contribute, and we came up with MediaWiki. 2005, I started editing in early 2006, and I still have the record in manual edits on that wiki. It's more like an encyclopedic site, doesn't have any semantics behind it. That will change in a couple of weeks. But after a couple of years, in NATO, people started to think about enterprise architecture. It's kind of a buzzword in industry, maybe. It popped up around that time, 2005, 2006. More and more organizations started to get an interest in enterprise architecture, in capturing the things that make an organization work related to each other, analyzes and see how you can improve it. Excellent definition by Gartner, and it says that it is translating business vision and strategy into an effective enterprise change. So it's about change. I work at a transformation headquarters. We are about change. So it was a good thing. We were tasked to pick it up, and we were looking at a way how to gather all that business information from NATO, specifically focused at C3, Station Command and Control. And so we came up with a very nice name. Giving something the right acronym and the right name in a political organization is very, very important. The first one, I have to go back. Yeah, this one is called Tidypedia. Tide is an abbreviation. It has to do with a technology program that we were running, and ACT is located in the Tidewater area of Virginia, so that was fun. The next big program they were planning, they had the acronym Tsunami, and then that big thing happened, so acronyms are very, very important. So in this case, my branch had said, okay, well, I don't want to use enterprise architecture, it will scare people away, especially the people that we depend upon to give us contributions, content. So we have to come up with another attractive name that sparks their interest and get them committed. So he thought of a geographic, geospatial metaphor that we were charting the C3 landscape. So in a way we were mapping the enterprise. So that was the birth of the Enterprise Mapping Wiki, or EM Wiki. That is a fully semantic media wiki. I'm afraid to tell you what kind of version we're still running on. We're very, very slow in that. Although in a couple of weeks, in July, we moved to a different hardware platform, and my colleagues promised me that we would go to the latest and greatest version of whatever we could find. So hopefully I will be able to include many of the features that you have been talking about that are not available in the version that we run. Anyway, semantic, fully semantic, started at 12th February 2010, and we started to capture a lot of information about the enterprise, about NATO. In order to do that, and in order to do enterprise architecture in general, you need a framework. Without a framework, you cannot put things in context. An architecture framework, there are many out there. In the military, the US military, for instance, has developed DODA, the Department of Defense Architecture Framework. In the UK, they have the MODA, the Ministry of Defense Architecture Framework. NATO even has its own architecture framework, the NAF. And there are many, many more. The biggest one at this moment is TOGA. It is the Open Group Architecture Framework that is more a from an open source mind, not proprietary rules and documentation. And there are a lot of activities in further exploiting and developing those architecture frameworks. But what is the most important thing is the elements that form the framework. In most cases, that is a meta model that defines how data is related to each other, that you find to capture about your organization. Architectural views that define what kind of output, what kind of products you need to be able to generate in order to perform on work. And a data exchange mechanism, so you can exchange your data with people that run the same architecture framework or slightly similar architecture frameworks. We didn't want to choose for one specific architecture framework. We wanted to be flexible in anything that we did. We didn't want to be constrained by any architecture framework, so we started from nothing and built it up ourselves. We used the semantic capabilities of MediaWiki to start building that meta model, and I'll show you that in a couple of slides. The views were very much a constraint. There are very detailed descriptions in frameworks what a view must be. It must show this and that in a tabular format or whatever. And we want to have full flexibility of what kind of output we wanted to create. And so we left the views for what they were, and we generate a lot more products than what is defined in the regular architecture framework. And the data exchange mechanism is how do you exchange large sets of data. We talked today about REF, XML, all kinds of formats. And MediaWiki enables a lot of that data exchange, and by using standardized export formats, it's much easier for us to share that with other people. We had to make some adaptations to our model in order to make it work, but there also we're not constrained by any framework. We have a lot of flexibility, and that's a big gain. So once we started building, we figured out that we have to come up with a structure how to build our meta model. And there are a couple of elements that are important. First of all, concepts. I wasn't aware that there was a concept namespace in the MediaWiki. Completely missed it. It must have been because we have such an old version. However, we use concepts as a definition of pages with information about specific taxonomy elements. So if you have a class of information, you define how they are built. And I'll show you an example when I get through this slide. The concepts are very important for our meta model. Those are the Lego blocks of our meta model. Data sets provide us the data from trusted sources. So we can import data from all kinds of organizations, standardization organizations like the ITU, the W3C, ISO, but also from all kinds of NATO resources, data that mostly metadata that we reuse in our meta model. Not everything comes from data sets. There are a lot of concepts that simply don't have a resource, so we have to build them ourselves with the subject matter experts and scientists. So that's why we use the forms. The forms are for manual input, the data sets are for the scripted inputs. Templates, okay, categories, okay, properties, okay, and perspectives. Remember that I talked about views? Views are very limited, very much defined what they contain. We can't another name, we call them perspectives. It's just you have a big chunk of data, and depending on your interest, depending on the direction in which you look at that big heap of data, you will have a different perspective, and we will produce output for your interest. So someone in program management will have a different view on this data than someone who does funding or someone who does operational research or concept development. Okay, so those are the building blocks. They are more or less, this picture shows a little bit simplistic how they are related to each other. So centrally is the concept, and eventually from the concept we create the perspectives. And you can see, for instance, here that the forms deliver user input, dataset delivers the data from trusted resources. So you see how those 7 building blocks from the structure relate to each other. So what is the concept? This is the most important element that we have in our meta model. It's an abstract representation of business information. Now, it could be, I could have copied the definition that was on the MediaWiki website about the concept namespace. It comes very close. So what we do, if we define a concept, we give them some information. We have templates for the description of the concepts as well, of course, and most of the pages have a definition of the concept, a description of what we have in the template or the several templates that define the concept, and we show in what context this concept is being used. To give an example, this is the services, technical services concept. It uses one category, 3 templates, a form. We have a certain color that symbolizes this concept, and a certain logo and a description. Currently, we have 300 records defined that define those services, and I'll show them later for you so you a little bit understand what we mean with those services. But this is the building; these are the building blocks of the service-oriented architecture, right? But for every concept, we have definition pages like this. Now, this is the metadata and description. Then you have a description of the templates that in the different fields in the attributes in the templates. We also have templates that we run on the property pages to give them some semantic values, and we can pull them up and repeat them here in descriptions and in data types, for instance. So this is consistent throughout our definition. And at the end, we generate a graph that shows how a certain concept is related to other concepts. In this case, you have services. Services has 2 internal objects, one with functional requirements, one with non-functional requirements. It relates to a references concept and a standards concept. And there are 5 other concepts in our data model, in our meta model, that are pointing towards this one. So, for instance, if you describe applications, the applications have services that they require in order to work. So that is the relation that we symbolize here. And if you go to the concept definition page of applications, you see in more detail how we have made that connection. So we have that for every concept. So every concept is maintained. The administration of the concept is maintained. But the trick is, of course, to translate it in the right template, with the right functionality, and the right form. The other important Lego block that we have is the data sets. Those are the trusted data that we import in our wiki. They too have a definition and a description. They also have information about what concepts are using that data. There may be more than one concept that use data from one data source. We keep an administration where we get it from. So who's our contact, when do we download it? If we can upload it to our wiki, we store the original source files as well. And we capture the data structure. So if we need to develop scripts for upload, we know what kind of fields we need to select for the upload. So this, for instance, is an example of a table for documents from the military committee. So you see, and probably it came in a CSV or a spreadsheet format. And you see the columns. One was, for instance, class, which stands for classification. And these are the 4 values that you can find in that field. So if we develop templates or scripts, you can reuse this information to make sure that we pick the right information from that data set. Same picture again, but now with the numbers. We have 63 concepts at this moment. We started with, I think, with 4 or 5, so it's slowly improving, maturizing. Is it a good word? Maturing. Thanks. 216 properties. I cleared up a lot of properties when I started to standardize them with the help of the Dublin Core Metadata Initiative. But I still think roughly 50 that I can get rid of. when I reorganize it a little bit, we have 28 data sets that fill more than 28 concepts. Because we only have 17 forms, it means that we roughly have 17 concepts that we don't have any outside data for, and where we depend on user input to create the content. 78 categories, 188 templates. I put dash lines around these ones because they're not directly related to the numbers in the meta model. But it gives you a little bit of idea of the complexity of the thing that we're working on. So back to the output, the most important thing, what do we get out of all this work? We create a number of perspectives, and I'd like to make a division between two different perspectives that are important, two groups of perspectives. One is a daily perspective. We have scripts that run every night that make a data dump from a wiki, create triplets, process that, some Python scripts turns it into wonderful charts and reports in PDF format. So every change that people make today will show up in those reports tomorrow morning. And we have baseline perspective. Baseline perspectives is we capture them by hand, store them in some other place, but link them back to the wiki so people can get them for historical analysis. And for instance, if you baseline a certain product because it is important for the requirements definition of a project that you're going to run, and the project is being outsourced to industry, you want to make absolutely sure that you can find the original documents that define the requirements. So that's why we baseline those things together with a full RDF data dump of our wiki, so in theory we could recreate the important data that led to those requirements definition. So the baseline perspective is very important for accountability and for the historical reference. One of the perspectives that we create is the C3 taxonomy. And I think this is one of the most important things that we have delivered so far in terms of political impact. We came up with a taxonomy to describe the building blocks of C3, Consultation, Command, Control in NATO. We start all the way up there with the NATO strategy and guidance, and through a whole process from policy and guidance to a defense planning analysis of capabilities. We go to description of business processes and information products, and then hop down to the technical realization of the requirements in what we call communications and information systems. In the industry, sometimes we use IT or ICT. In the military, they have to talk about CIS. But it's the same arena where you have applications and a services framework. Same as smartphone, you have the apps on here, and you don't care what happens in the background, but you just assume that those services that you need in order to run your apps, that they're there. Well, this is the whole stack of services that we have identified for C3, for Navy C3. So this is not for weapon systems or whatever, but for information systems, managed weapon systems, but it's focused on information technology, not on anything else. So if I zoom in a little bit, you see this is just a segment of their taxonomy. In a higher level, you see some of the building blocks that you would have, for instance, in core enterprise services, which was just a line here. You see enterprise support services that contain unified communication and collaboration, information management, geospatial services, and enterprise resource programming, ERP programming. No, I believe so. Plus, we have a separate stack for information assurance and service management and control, and that runs throughout the whole, almost the whole taxonomy. But you see the level of detail increases, and of course there's much more information in there, so we go a number of levels deep. And all the projects that we run in NATO to, for instance, to do centralization of data storage, creating data centers and stuff like that. All the requirements for the services that they need to change in order to make that happen are defined here in larger terms. Behind that, you see about 63 concepts here, a little bit less because I left a couple of them out. But you see here how those concepts are related to each other, how the connections run from, for instance, from increments to actors, or from events to locations, or from essential operational capabilities to military functions, etc. I didn't depict in here what is a uploaded concept, or which concept depends on uploads and which one depends on user input. But to give you an idea of the complexity of the meta model that we have built, and if you go into more detail, and the graphics rendering system that I had couldn't fix it on a 4x3 poster, so this one runs down further here, so it's a very lengthy thing. But it gives you in a very high level of detail of how all the things in our meta model are connected to each other, and then zoom in a little bit on one of the examples where you see how business processes, for instance, define certain information exchange requirements, and those are linked to information products, and of course somehow they are all connected to the references, because the references are very, very important. And you also see that both business processes and information products can be gathered in a group with some other information, so you can have a you can select a subset of our data and produce a separate report that focuses on parts of these concepts. So for instance, only looking at information management, or only looking at maritime operations, stuff like that. Give an idea about the figures that we're talking about. Now you've seen the version that we're working on. Not that many articles, a nice number of pages, and what I like is a nice number of registered users. In reality, we have roughly 200 users that have a more or less regular contribution to our wiki. Okay, so now you wonder, okay, well, it's nice, looks a little bit like it could have been a hospital, it could have been a geological organization. So what makes it different for NATO? Why is all this work important for us? It is because the enterprise architecture helps us to better understand the requirements that we have for G3, and that is translated into information systems and communication systems projects. You wouldn't believe how many money is spent in the alliance to make that work. It's unbelievable. And the better we are in capturing those requirements, the better we are in aligning all those projects, we can save time, we can save money, and we can provide a better product. And that works because we can use our EM-Wiki to create an overarching architecture which helps the authorities in our headquarters in Brussels to make decisions about policy guidance and about common funding of information systems projects. And it helps the rest of our headquarters, transformation headquarters, in one of the big jobs that we are engaged in, and that is capability development. So the capturing the requirements and translating that into proposals for new capabilities, for new projects. Talked about the perspectives. Yes, and this is a funny thing. We've been working on SOCSOC to make this work and to give this a level of complexity and a level of sophistication that met our expectations, and that gave us a good feeling that we were really contributing in a level that we have never been able to do before in NATO. But now other organizations in NATO are not only using our wiki, but also reusing. They are extracting information from our wiki and using it in their whatever their data set is that they're working with. So they're reusing the information that we can offer. And we are the only place in NATO that relate those things with each other, that have a meta model that takes into account those semantics. Nobody has that. A lot of the data that we have, depending on user input, nobody has that. I showed you business processes. We don't have a collection of business process descriptions in our alliance. Although that is a driving force for some of the requirements that you need, nobody ever worked on it, and we started to work on it. So within NATO is used, but also national. There are different nations that I work with right now that reuse our information to better align their national efforts. Germany, Austria, even New Zealand, someone is working with me on this. So it is a nice success. Of course, we are continuing the development, trying to improve the meta model, finding new concepts that better help us capture requirements, and also improving the usability, improving the user interface, and some of that depends on the upgrade of our hardware and software, which will happen in a couple of weeks. We go to the latest version of the software that enables me to include more functionality that I don't have available right now. So as a review, and these are my closing remarks, I guess, is the reason why we started in 2005 with a simple media wiki website, Tidypedia, was to provide an easy online collaborative platform. Not only for the people in NATO that we were working with, and this Tidypedia was also focused on that NATO C3. It was on C3 related issues. Not only with people in NATO, but especially with people outside. That's why we don't run on a NATO web network. That's why we don't work with the standard NATO software, not with SharePoint. We run with MediaWiki, and still a lot of people are working with it. We have a lot of communities that have their own portals on the website, and we will be using that for years and years. The reason why we started to use the EM-Wiki, the Enterprise Mapping Wiki, is that we were looking for a tool for enterprise architecture. We investigated the tools that we have on the market. Wonderful pieces of software. Lots of work goes into that. But if you can afford $2,500 to $3,000 per license per user, you can do that. But then you can only afford to let architects themselves work on it, because it takes so much training and so much expertise. Your subject matter experts, the scientists, your operational users, they don't know how to handle that software. And that was the big problem for us. We wanted something with an easy learning curve that was accessible and which didn't scare the experts away. So that's why we started with the EM-Wiki. Critical success factor, my personal belief, is that we were able to provide a return on investment on the efforts that the contributors had to give to, with their content. There are many ways in which people can capture information. Many ways. They can use SharePoint, they can use Excel, they can use whatever they want. But if you want to put that information into your wiki, you have to have something to lure them in and to keep them committed once you got them. And what we were able, especially with our approach to perspectives, to the outputs that we were able to deliver, we gave them something in return that they were not able to provide themselves or create themselves, or if they could, it would take them a lot more effort to create those reports and overviews and tables than using our tool. And I think that is the critical success factor why we have achieved with the wiki today. Now, the critical design decision, I think that was the basis for the success, is that we stepped away from the standard frameworks and we choose a very flexible and pragmatic approach in data management. And that is still the driving force behind the development of our wiki. Now, based, and this is the thing that I wrote down during the lunch break. I asked my branch head a couple of days ago when David asked me to do the presentation. Is okay if I give a presentation? You know that nobody has seen a NATO flag or whatever. So this is not an official NATO presentation, and otherwise I would have run it through our personal, the strategic communications branch, whatever, and it would have taken longer than a visa for Iranian citizens in the United States. But he reminded me of one thing, and that's the primary reason to give a presentation is because we are a very happy user of Semantic Media Wiki, and we get that for free. We can do magic with it, and we just have to say thanks to the people who are behind this, because it's a wonderful piece of work. And I know as much as that we are still working on the development of our solutions, the Media Wiki community is still working on the improvement of the software. So for me and for my colleagues in NATO, a heartfelt thank you for everyone who's working on that. Thank you very much. And that is my story about EM, enterprise mapping. I have this presentation uploaded to my page on the conference website, so you will have my contact information as well. If you have an interest in getting an account to our portal where you can watch our work, then you need to send a request according to this procedure. And if you're not working in a military organization and not working in a military organization for one of the 28 NATO member nations, you have to come up with a sponsor. If I would be your sponsor, then it would be easier for you to get access. So if you have interest, feel free to get an account and steal whatever good work that we have done and use it in your own wiki. Any questions? Any interest? Do I need to give a live demonstration of what we have, or did this give you a good feeling of what we have running? Yeah?
You have a next visualization
not with the version that we're running? Come on. Okay, so Tidypedia, homepage Tidypedia, communities of interest. We're trying to bring people together, right? It's a collaboration platform. So we have all kinds of portals. The top one, enterprise architecture, but we have for geospatial, for civil military cooperation. We have even communities that are not even from our headquarters, but are from other elements in NATO. Cyber defense is a big one. So if you go, for instance, to enterprise architecture, you know the thing. This is pretty much encyclopedic static information. You have some information about documentation, about events, and behind that you have some nice information about the administration and the scheduling of the events. I was looking at the MEGA presentations from Joran and thinking about if I could only have semantics on this type of pages, and I could use MEGA to create a conference app for every conference that we have there, that would be wonderful. So that is something I will be working on. This one is linked to enterprise mapping. We're already loading it up. Enterprise mapping, our main, or easiest navigation piece is this poster. We call it in NATO. This is called the candy color poster. So if somebody, if you meet anyone in Brussels or whatever, anyone, and you talk about the candy color poster, you see it all over NATO nowadays. One of the proofs of the success that we have with our work. I asked my branch head, how did you come up with those awful colors? He said it was a standard setting in Microsoft PowerPoint or so, and I copied it. This is generated, and well, it's a PNG, but it's generated from the original breakdown, and this one is a clickable map. So that's simple stuff behind it. So you can click, for instance, on business processes, and we'll go to the business processes page. But I was really looking at the business process category. It gives you an idea of how many we have described right now, 315. We just look at the three. You can see these are for information assurance, so there are a couple of things that are cyber related in here, but these are all kinds of things. Auditing processes, trustworthiness determination. These are all very detailed description of processes in that area, and it all goes all the way down to pick another one. Intelligence here and personal recovery, air operations, etc., etc. So we have all kinds of different kind of experts that know all about air operations. They work on that piece of the taxonomy. Let's go up a little bit and show you how many concepts we have. Of course, we have them in a list. Come on, buddy. Now you see the whole list for every concept, and this is for the users. That's one thing that I didn't mention, is the concept definition pages that I showed you, the data set definition pages, are information about governance, are information about style guides and stuff like that. We put them all in the project namespace of our wiki. So our main namespace almost only contains data that is relevant to the architecture itself. The definition of the concepts has nothing to do with the C3 taxonomy itself. It's an enabling feature, so we put it in the project namespace. Lucky for us, my boss chose a very short acronym for this wiki, so the project namespace is just EM, taking a lot of typing. But you see, for instance, a concept for applications. This one links to the category 474 applications identified. We have a topic page that gives a little more background of what we're describing. Form. This is the concept definition. This is in the project namespace of our wiki, and we have a CSV and a JSON files that you can download directly from this list to capture all the application information that we have.
You mentioned that you filter the data to that.
They could, yeah. The guy that I worked with from New Zealand, he was creating a lot of shortcuts with CSVs, with JSONs. I said, oh, yeah, well, that's a nice idea, just to have them ready for users if they are looking for that information. You don't need to define it yourself. So I wrote, in the template, I wrote a little script, a little code to automatically generate them in this table. So it gives you an idea of how many concepts we have. The governance page, you see that this one is in the EM namespace. Oh, better use it. EM namespace. So if you do a normal search in the wiki, you won't find this one because the normal search only looks at the main namespace. But it gives you an idea of how we structure our governance, who's in the lead for what, how many lead for structure, and it gives you some of the information that we have available there. So one of the things that we have there is the meta model. Is it this one? Yeah. Right. So I can go down a little bit to get the idea. Now the trouble with the thing is, and I should use Java or anything else for that. I'm using Graphis, which is a nice simple feature, but the rendering of Graphis in Wiki is very limited. So believe it or not, this is all edited by hand, cut and paste, and prepare it in Notepad, and then hope it will work. There is no way to automate this in Graphis, so I really need to look at other rendering options to make that work. To go back to the home page, you can get an idea of the perspective that we have. That's the last thing I want to show you. It runs. Yes, it's still running. It's connecting. Yes. Okay, first the baselines. So of course for the baselines we also wrote a template, we put some semantics in there, so we have a couple of types of perspectives, governance, implementation, coherence, validation, and requirements perspectives. Now, look at, for instance, 15 June 2012, the C3 board of NATO, the highest P3 related organization in the alliance, approved our wiki for use as an overarching architecture. And so we have a report and a poster for that version baseline, together with an RDF of the EN wiki at that date. And hopefully for every baseline that we have in the list, take another one, web-enabled services. Let's see what they have there. Very long description. And yeah, there is a requirement specification for that implementation project and an RDF as well. So that's how we have the baselines available. Now if I go back and show you the daily perspectives, those are generated overnight. You zoom in a little bit. On the governance level, we have those, it can be called a poster. This is a little bit more detailed. And you have reports with them as well. This is my branch head going nuts because he wanted to create one PDF with all the data that we had in our EM wiki, so there is a document of I don't know how many thousand pages, but it's a lot. But in order to make a point, we printed them all out once in four binders, double-sided in 4 binders, just to make a case for some people that were not convinced that we were doing great work. And then these are all reports about requirements validation and about implementation perspectives that we run each day. So these are typically areas where people are working on preparation of projects, and they are about to release that to an implementation authority who starts building a concept, or start building a prototype and then outsourcing it to industry. These contain the requirements and the specifications for those projects. And then finally, we also have some coherence perspectives all the way down. The basic coherence perspective, this is the one that tries to find errors in data, in descriptions of certain attributes in concepts. And this is typically one where I would like to use NLP. This one is done with NLP, but offline. So this one is not, all the rest is done overnight. This one is done manually because someone takes a data dump, creates a set of triplets, and then runs his NLP solution over it and creates that report and proves it with the solution that you have showed us. This is something that we could do overnight as well. So that would be a great opportunity for us to improve. So those are the data perspectives, and well, that's about it. You know, I can show you a page of a service or an application, but it's just data. Data is data. Somebody said this week. Let me just give you an idea, and I think that the maritime is relatively well described. And that's also a lot of these applications, a lot of these communities of interest still have to start or just started with a breakdown of their data, and they don't have that many content. And we always have to look at what we can show to other people instead of empty pages. A rather short description, they can get away with it, gives you a breakdown where this application fits in the hierarchy. It lists a number of requirements. They are captured in a internal object. No non-functional requirements here, although they inherit non-functional requirements from their parents and their parents up in the stack in the hierarchy. It identifies which information products are being used as an input and which are the outputs of your application. The required services, so this is this famous link that I showed you in that spaghetti diagram, how applications link to services. That happens here. links to some other NATO typical stuff, yeah, well, here you see the semantic values that we have for this specific application, this page. And all those pages in the wiki more or less look like this, of course. You know, some have more fields, more attributes, or properties, sorry, some have less. But we try to give them a little bit of attractive layout with the columns, for instance, and with the context. People like to navigate using the context instead of the info boxes. Well, that's fine with us. But it gives you a little bit of an idea of the magnitude and the detail that we are trying to capture here. After all, there's one thing that is on my slides, and you will read it, and if I mention it now, you will remember it as well, is our architecture is a logical architecture. So the technical architecture is done by other people. They are developing the solutions. We are not looking at solutions. We are looking at the basic requirements for certain services and applications, for certain business processes. So we don't care about if something runs on Windows or Linux or Apple. If we use SharePoint or whatever. If we talk about certain services in general. We don't talk about the fielded capabilities that enable us to run these services and applications. So it's a logical discussion, and that's a lot easier for us. So we don't have to maintain a whole list of versions and stuff of all the solutions that are out there. We're not looking at that. And that's about the level of detail that we go to. That saves us a lot of time. Any questions? Like I said, it looks a lot like what you would have in a hospital, in a different layout, but the level of detail and the way that you organize your information is similar. And some other speakers would have the same thing. The biggest thing that we have here is the meta model behind it, and I'll try to explain it a little bit to you.
So, content, I wonder if you can turn to this, it seems like that at least like a guide where people would feel that they should navigate through and come up with
Well,
yeah.
So this is what happens. We know that we have funding for certain capability packages, and 7 figures, 8 figures, and then in some board, some decision is made that by the end of third quarter 2014, we need to deliver a project proposal for something, civil military cooperation. Okay, so now we have to actively engage the civil military cooperation, the CINIC community, and try to convince them to start putting data in there, because otherwise they have an empty report. They have no requirements at all. So we empower the community of interest, we give some training, we assign an architect to help them, and it depends on people in our headquarters, the contacts in our headquarters for that community to get the other people in. Often, if it's a big project, we can hire some expertise, scientific expertise from an agency in NATO, the NATO Communications and Information Agency. They are sort of customer funded, so we have some money to hire them, and those are people that work in it and contribute to.
Is there like a way that an individual critical document?
Uh-huh.
I think it seems to me that the measuring competition is about measuring inside
Well, one of the things that we did is to make it easier for people to make a sub-selection of the pages that they were specifically interested in. So go back to, for instance, CINIC. Someone can create a CINIC group and put then all the pages in there. And you can create a Bootstrap group or a Jimmy group, and you put the things in there that you like. And then the next day you will get a report with all the details, relevant details that are in there. and you can tick off for yourself what still needs to be improved. So Cynic is not in here, but it gives you an idea to air command control. Somebody put all the elements, the taxonomy elements that will be related to air command and control in one bucket. Business processes, information products, user applications, and services. And this is the report that is generated overnight with all the details for those building blocks. And we added some script to give them a nice picture of all the air applications and how they relate to each other. Did that answer the question? Yeah. René, you had a question as well? And if somebody wants a specific report with the data that we have in here and we don't have it available, it's just a matter of writing the query and put it on the page. Or I ask somebody else who's much smarter than I am, or a much better programmer to write a script and to create a PDF. René.
Maybe just quickly, how much do you care about traceability? For example, you have queries that will show you that there are requirements without any services, or you have some services, but if there are no
those are the coherency report has a couple of rules that it tries to check. So, for instance, if you have a service with no requirements, it will show a red flag, and it will be listed in that coherency report. All the rules that we use, one of my colleagues is working on it, on defining those rules, but they are listed in our governance area in the project namespace. We have a list of all those rules, and they are supposed to drive that coherency report. And every once in a while, a couple of times in a week, some of us sit down together with a laptop and we open up the coherency report and we start editing, trying to empty the report. And so it's a continuous process to fix it.
Implemented the rules? Are they inventories or from outside?
Well, that coherency report is the rules are checked with the use of NLP. So there is one offline, but it would be great if we could run them live from the wiki, and we could, for instance, give a direct feedback to contributors if their, for instance, their requirements definition was not compliant with the grammar rules that we have set, or the description that was not compliant or not long enough, stuff like that. Right now we are not able to do that. So now we have to catch up every time. And the downside of that is that it's usually the architects fixing the problems and not the computer.
Maybe we could, anyone wants to grab a copy of the report. But I have one full section and two hot section. So
okay.
Before we go, unfortunately, I also have to say goodbye. I have to run to the next conference, which I'm not very often. But thank you very much, Felicia and all of you, for coming all the way and giving me the opportunity to learn something. Thank you to Renee and David, my fabulous colleagues who helped me make this happen. And this was a wonderful thing. I wish you would stay. You would want to apply. Have a safe day. Thank you.
Thank you.
oh yeah.
I guess.
Yeah.
Well, he's always just get access to the website.
Nothing sure about the NC on our tax.
I don't know. I don't work for the United States.
But he works in the United States.
Give me about half an hour?
At the moment, I mean, next This is only 15, 20 minutes. But questions, hopefully a lot of questions.
Yeah, well, yeah, all the time you can response to the yeah, it's not good. Oh, yeah. I use it. So, whenever you use the focus, it's nice to have everything almost in the in one place. Yeah, there's something like that. And I first create the little draft and then concentrate on it. And I put in place. I change into this one and make sure I fill out the little block and I use the standard block also. And then make sure that I fill out inside the UNL town, you can run the light, you can open the traffic, so you can use design. But identification that and the sometimes that's the people might see the world. I would have told this. I would have told this. And you would know that you would do a different type of and the work out there is that's good. You start it. Not like we started with and everything is done in the four concepts, and now slowly we will get on with the model, and we can move things away from the center. That is everything, a new concept, everything. I would not know this for any was when you which concept was using up in because that's it. Yeah, before, I had a second, I call it default concept, I think people thing is, now you said, before you process, the things that make it concept, I'm talking about, I didn't show you that we have a whole thing, process, all the whole wiki, and we went through that, every wiki we have, using the same concept. Some take a little bit more, some have this attitude and that concept, or I want to take that relationship the other way around. And if we make a decision, we have to make sure that that's not crazy. So because that is the baseline of the rule. So if we make things perfect, make sure that we also have a related documentation. Keep your memory, but then it's easier to say the relationship and the direction of the patient is interesting. And that's just things, I think you can say, that's the definitions, or if you change the big culture, I think that's the real everyone. You don't go on that think about energy, don't want to get one thing, but I like to be patient, but I bet and then working But we put those things in the concept phase, in the project phase, project name phase. Don't put those things in the name. Oh, I think I'm just going to crack that into my board. Then eventually you will do and really start working with that. So we can find the search for all of the things. You can still find it and you can just a little bit use up. And I didn't use the subject for study. They're all in the boxes. But if someone is looking for information, the user is not interested in the definition of our data set. They are interested in the architecture data. So that's the only thing that is if I use all of that stuff in the technical, that's not outside of
It's a puzzle. It will create a puzzle. It's a puzzle solver. So
Making things simple, or making things simple is complicated.
yeah. Yeah.
Just are you waiting there? Just are you working under the semantic solution? Non, non, je l'amène. C'est quelqu'un qui on me l'a demandé le soir. C'est un workshop. A workshop. A what? A workshop. Play a film. Non, non, non. Ah ouais, ah ouais. So this is just to show you the difference between Irish and English singers, and do the same song in two different versions. Two different, same notes, but just the bowing. That's a nice. So this was Irish. Let's go to come back to Quebec. And when we come in Quebec, and we have different styles, we have some songs that are more, I don't know how I could describe it. This one is from a little village in Gascony. Little village? In Gascony. Non, non, non. C'est un quartier, c'est Douglastown, à côté de Gascony.
That's the first time I used it. have to follow that?
I thought you were dancing and jigging. You should have.
You don't want to see me, Jay.
You should have used the webcam.
Oh, good. Next one.
So Peter just mentioned that some others might want to go to the airport right after the conference is ending. So if you want to team up and share a taxi,
I'll pay for it.
There is a taxi line just one block up from here. So you can just hop in. And it can take a while on Friday afternoon to get there because there's lots of construction and weekends traffic. So plan on extra time.
Anyone? Airport? Yeah. Is that airport? Oh, to the airport.
Oh, I thought you said Apple.
Alcohol?
No, not alcohol, Apple.
No. To the airport?
They have alcohol at the airport.
I'd be going to I think you are about an hour. Yeah?
I have time.
Yeah, okay.
All right, so I guess I'll leave it with the camera. But. Okay. So I'm Mark Hirschberger, and I'm here to talk about the MediaWiki Foundation, which is our nexus. That's a bad name. So it's not, that name is not in the schedule here. Listed as a MediaWiki consortium, so still trying to figure that out. All this is work in progress. And I'm here to talk about what we're doing and how you can get involved. And I would love to have everyone get involved. So we're starting a non-profit organization to give third-party users like semantic MediaWiki users, like all of you, everyone who's not Wikimedia, a voice in MediaWiki development. And so who's we though? We is myself, Mark Hirschberger, and my partner, Marcus Glazer. A bit of our bio. I'm the original, and since they changed the name, only Bugmeister for Wikimedia. And but since I left Wikimedia, I worked initially as a volunteer release manager for 1 or 2 releases of MediaWiki, and then I've been working as a release manager ever since through this contract, and I'm now a MediaWiki consultant for corporations, individuals, and nonprofits. My partner, Marcus Glazer, started a business over in Germany with some partners to do MediaWiki on an enterprise level, and through that he's developed Blue Spice, and he's a member of the board of Wikimedia Deutschland. So in last year, in July, we bid on and received a contract to handle release management for MediaWiki. So basically this means that we're people who put together the firewalls and try to make sure it all works. So if it doesn't work, you know, I'm personally blank. Actually, so part of that contract in the first year, we took care of laying all the groundwork and getting the nitty-gritty details of technical issues of making a release. We have that pretty much done. In the second year of our 5-year plan, what we're doing is focusing on building a sustainable organization to manage MediaWiki and to get other, stakeholders like yourself involved. So as part of that, we have a mission statement, and the mission is to manage MediaWiki releases for the benefit of third-party, non-Wikimedia users. And our vision is to bring to build a sustainable, self-supporting organization to promote a healthy, respectful, and interactive ecosystem where third-party users are involved in the development of media literacy. So what does this mean? What's the impact for all of you? Oh, how did I get here? I really went ahead, sorry. It gets more exciting, see? Like color. So, to talk about the impact, I'm going to have to explain the upstream codependency problem that I think is, anyone who's spending time in media wiki development or working on extension, this should be familiar. On the right over here, I guess that's the left. On the left, you'll see that's Wikimedia Foundation and all the work around Wikipedia. And so they're focused on stuff on Wikipedia and everything that happens there. They have a rolling release cycle of every 2 weeks. So every 2 weeks they push out new code and it gets tested, which is great because that's how we have relatively bug-free code for free. Over here on the right, though, is all the extension creators, semantic media, deep dynamic page lists, Google Analytics, all this other stuff. Over here on the right, but sometimes the stuff that happens on the left affects the stuff that happens on the right. Now I'm going to talk about one of these instances. You can see this effect that's happening in just the past couple of months. So we're saying we can solve this problem by creating an organization here that communicates to the Wikimedia developers the importance or effects of what they do on the third-party users. When Wikimedia was a smaller organization, it was easier for one person just to, he was managing the whole thing, or relatively one. And it was easier for him to manage all this communication because it was just him, or a small group of people. As their priorities change, as they try to add features to Wikipedia, they don't have the bandwidth to deal with all this communication with everyone outside who uses the software, that they gave away. Let me go back, read some of this. Very important. So we're tasked by the foundation to manage the release. We are empowered to make any necessary updates. So I'll walk you through the process where we did that in the most recent months. We have a direct line of communication back to the Wikimedia developers, and actually all of you do too. But as I said, we have relationships that we've built up with these people. So perhaps that's my advantage. So we react to problems, but we also have the ability to be proactive, and that's what we're trying to do by building this organization. Is gather a group of people who are interested in these issues. So let's talk about an example from recent history, and if I can get this to work, I'll put on these students. Oh, I can't. Doesn't. Oh, there it is. Okay. I see it. You don't. I'll move it. Anyone want to say anything while we figure out what to do? So, no, I'm sorry. So, okay. In 2008, this bug right here was created, which basically says there's a problem with core media wiki that if you request a page and it's a redirect page from MediaWiki, then it will give you the redirect tag. It won't give you the rendered page that you're being redirected to. Semantic MediaWiki took advantage of this and said, we want to redirect. Meanwhile, someone back in 2008, someone filed this bug. So this is sitting there, and Wikimedia developers are thinking, this is a bug that needs to be solved. They're not thinking too hard about it. It took them 6 years to solve it, but this is a bug. So in January of this year, I can get this to go back. In January of this year, Brad George fixed the bug. There's new content handler that makes fixing the bug natural. He was able to provide a really intuitive fix for this bug. In February, James in Hong Kong saw this bug, saw the fix, and he saw how it affected semantic MediaWiki. And he went and he reported this issue on GitHub. But the problem is, MediaWiki or Wikimedia developers, core developers, don't look at GitHub. So they didn't have any clue that this was causing any problems. A month later, James goes back and he files a bug in Bugzilla, where Wikimedia developers say, oh, that's a bug in semantic MediaWiki. In fact, I want to pull up that thing right here. And it comes up. So there's a lot of back and forth on this bug. So there's James's initial report. Very thorough. Let's see. Here's Brad's response. He basically says, must be a semantic MediaWiki problem. Going down, skipping. At this point, someone has notified me, hey, this is an issue. Actually, if we go back to the slide, I can do that. Yeah. At this point, we had released the first release candidate for 123, and I said, has anyone seen any problems that 123 has with, any extensions out there? And Jamie, I don't know how to say that last name. Does anyone? Oh, where's my name? Is that a Norwegian name? Singlestead? Okay. Well, anyway, that's him. He's the guy behind Wiki Apiary. He's a good friend of his who I've never met. And he said, you should really look at this bug. So within a few days of being notified of that bug, I looked at the cause of it, and I offered a patch to back out the fix, or the fix for the bug at there, which caused this other bug. And within a week after that, we had applied and refined the patch. So you can see that the involvement of the release team here, when we were finally notified, it's like 2 weeks to get the problem solved versus 2-3 months up there. So I think that shows the effectiveness that we have here. And I will read this slide because this I like to pat myself on the back. But this is Jamie's original comment where he says, MediaWiki core team sure could do a better job of working with extension developers. I think I can say that nearly all of the core bugs I've seen highlighted by semantic MediaWiki are by default rejected until it is proven that there are problems. If you compare support for extension developers Git and MediaWiki, to that in WordPress, it's amazing how much core work it is, and it's disheartening to the entire ecosystem in CCD hex mode. So, see hex mode, that's it. And then on the bug, you probably understand this. Jeroen said, you know, thank you for recognizing that this is an API break instead of just, you know, continuing the finger pointing, and got the problem, got the discussion focused on providing a solution. So that's not that heavy. I'm sorry. So this is all good, but we need your involvement. We need everyone else to be involved, because if we don't, you know, when I had that bubble in the middle, if people aren't using that bubble in the middle, it's not so useful. It is a problem. So we need your involvement. Help us to know you better. We're going to be releasing some surveys. We're going to do some environmental scans, that sort of thing. So respond to that. And next, of course, when we talk about fundraising, it's a nonprofit. Well, Marky Marcus is not a nonprofit. We will create a nonprofit. It's a nonprofit, so help us figure out how, help us fund this organization. Also, spread the word and volunteer. When you talk to other developers, and other users of MediaWiki, you know, let them know that this organization is out there, and if they have problems, and it could be related to core issues, then, you know, we're the people to talk to. And finally, if you see that we're not doing something, volunteer information to us. Give us criticism. Let us know, you know, like Jamie did. Hey, this is something you should look at. Or if you think you can do something, just let us, you know, do it. So here's our contact information on the wikireleaseteam.org, because we haven't cleared trademark issues yet with Foundation, so we can't use MediaWiki. On wikireleaseteam.org, there's a page to put in your interest in this, of being contacted, and hopefully, everyone here, and those that have left, and even those that aren't here, will go put their name up there on the one page you can edit on that with me. So, and there's my contact information, my partners as well. He's in Germany, so if you're over in Europe, you know, maybe you can call him. But me. And that's it. Are there any questions? Yes.
Yes, I know there's a bit of tension around the internal structure that the communities for development and GitHub. I don't know if that needs to be put up, but I mean, I think that as much as I want to be really open,
Sure.
else, GitHub is becoming a lot of people.
Right.
Really open and easy to talk about on. I think partially out of consideration that the difficulties in people are very friendly. But one of the things that we have going is that all software has a built process. It will seem to, you know, present a lot of these problems. I don't know a lot of it.
You're talking about software that runs GitHub.
No, I'm talking about they have all kinds of systems that are checking code. They automatically run testing on it.
Right.
We saw this together.
So they have the same thing set up on Garrett, and that may all be changing. I don't know if you're aware of it, but they're looking at another system that could be used, looking at another system to manage bug reports, planning, issue tracking, source control as well, and moving it all over. I think the name is Fabricator. So, yeah, it is a problem. Garrett is a problem. I think the foundation, I don't want to speak for him, so I'm not going to speak for him, but I'll just give you my impression that the foundation wants to have something that it controls. Yeah. And you know, GitHub is a for-profit corporation, and who knows, you know, what they're going to do next year. So.
I really understand that. Whenever somebody says submit a bug on Garrett, it's one way thing. You know, I have one bug that I submitted some years ago, and going, this is not a business one, I think that I have unsubscribed. So
Well, if you want to know how to unsubscribe, I can show you that.
I haven't done it yet, but it's really complicated.
No, and yes, I do understand the complaint, and hope, maybe this magical fabricator thing will fix a lot of that. I have my doubts, but, maybe. So yeah, that's an important issue. Any other questions? Anything I can answer and say? I'm your man.
What kind of commitment would you be asking from the users? If we submit our contact details?
I'm just going to be, so the contact details, the commitment there is, you'll get an email from me, or if you put your phone number on there, I'll call you up and ask for your email. And then, I'll set up a mailing list and you can unsubscribe from it if you need to. So level of commitment right now on that page is low. But, this is something that I set up this week is to say, hey, I need a wiki page for this. So that's why that's there right now. Well, it'll evolve into me begging for money. No, I lie. I'm not. It will not just be me asking for money. I will maybe once a year. But we'll have to take stuff. We'll set goals.
I'm not that money issue, but also I still haven't quite got a clear picture what's the future of this ecosystem. So, are there any plans how this is going to be sustained in the long run? Is it based on donations, or will there be stakeholders that will buy into all these organizations?
So we have, this is part of what we're discussing. And we have talked about, having stakeholders and, like Wikia or whoever would be a good stakeholder. WikiHow might be another one. Organizations like that, but they make it their business to be dependent on MediaWiki. So, maybe we'll have this stakeholder thing like the consortium, like, the talk was originally titled. But, nothing is nailed down. We have to make new plans and try and figure out what to do.
Maybe follow-up question, but
yeah.
Your goals are to act more as a mediator than as a developer.
That initially, yes.
So maybe we could relate to this, who's that actually the main developer? The main developers of media are the main people employed by the public.
Initially, yes.
Yeah.
Initially, yes. Over time, it's in our 5-year plan to kind of manage, some of this other development that Wikimedia just isn't going to be interested in doing. Like you were talking about page permission. That's not something that Wiki needs to be on Wikipedia. But it is a lot of people are interested in that. And I think that is something that we could fund and find developers for and that sort of thing. Another issue that I'm thinking of that there's actually money behind this when I mentioned it before, is Internet Explorer support for visual editing. Yeah, so it'd be great to get that, but unfortunately, Wikimedia's resources are stretched enough as it is, trying to support, people that they have. But corporations, they would love to have visual editor support in IE. So that's something else that we could work on. And I have a client who said, give me a date when visual editor would be supporting IE. Couldn't do that, but maybe with that's the sort of question that we could answer and say, here's a date. Y'all just gonna let me sweat up here, or am I gonna? Yeah, go ahead.
now hearing this, well, obviously there are a lot of interests here around this product. Many people use it. Many people provide consulting or hosting services based on Wikipedia and use it massively, of course, on Wikipedia. And of course, all of these have somehow an interest to influence what's going on.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of who's actually controlling the new organization thing. So it's now you two so far, but both of you also are kind of involved in this
Right.
purposes. So is that intended? I mean, do you keep them apart? And
We're going to have to keep them apart. Yeah, in order to run a nonprofit in accordance with U.S. law, we're going to have to keep them separate. You know, there will be a board for nonprofit. Right. So, yes. But yes.
You look at B corporations or social
If that's something, right now we're focused on satisfying Wikimedia's requirements. And they've said, you know, basically if I would fix it, I'll talk to them. Maybe they would be interested in that. I don't know. Definitely this is something that could be arranged as a for-profit, you know, thing. But I think because the foundation is the one initially funding it, that's not going to help. Oh, wait.
One last thing for the people.
No. I think it's been gone.
Yeah, I was a little worried about that.
I usually want to but
So we have a MacBook Air adapter. Can you just really pay for it? You have that on USB or
it's on my laptop. I don't have it. Oh, I probably most grateful for the lot to write on the chalkboard. This is
That's a DVI. Oh, that's DVI. We have another adapter, DVI to DVI. Welcome to 2014.
Is it analog API or people don't call me. This is old API.
Oh, yeah.
Macs are great. They're so thin and light until you plug them into that. Try that one. Sorry. Thank you.
This is my very first PowerPoint ever.
That was my very first PowerPoint ever.
Really? Okay.
Back to back.
Well, I can start off by saying this started out as I was working for a company called LexisNexis. Most of my work was as a case law editor. I wrote some court papers. And I mentioned earlier in the week to someone that what she described about going in with the Ziva,
it goes in and takes the relevant sentences out of the picture. And that's basically what a case analytic did right in a case like somebody. You go through, you would read the court opinions and you would find the relevant information and put it in the form. But this is not.
Don't drive your problems up.
Right there with the,
If you were to write, try to write it correctly, don't go to that. It's not that kind of stuff. Okay, so. With the direction, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Well, it started out as a kind of a quality of life project because I'm diabetic, and
I was kind of obsessive about my work, so I didn't. I was having a lot of issues with my health, and my doctor told me you can't keep it track. And I was looking for something some sort of work I could do for the, kind of balance out things. And I had done some translation work for LexisNexis, and I found out how hard it was, and I wanted to find a way to make it easier. So that's how Law Explorer started. And this is what my idea for making translation easy for people like me. You consider basically research, writing, and translation support one another. If the writing expresses the research, and translation helps you, when you write for translation, you write better anyway. So you actually, by writing with translation in mind, you will improve your writing. And translation also expands the scope of what you can research. So these are my objectives. To make the language and the terminology of law easier to find a way to facilitate the language and terminology of law, and, so people can actually participate. Why is the terminology difficult? These are some of the reasons. And I've seen in some of the presentations this week about how you deal with synonyms. So that is part of my the extraction of semantic meaning. I am a big fan of medical by the way.
I have one quick comment. So,
Yes.
You have to, one for before that, the girl
And then when you start translating, you have false trends and equivalence issues. That's not easy to do. In fact, the idea of translation of equivalence is really a myth. One person from whom I have drawn inspiration is Peter Mark-Legit, who was a medical doctor who wanted to learn how to use words better, so he made up a thesaurus over a period of decades. And these are some respected writers out there in Barlow and Hughes, or some respected translation writers in Spain. And this guy, the country. Moving up to present times, Serena Mangoli is a blogger, and you might be familiar with the Legal Information Institute at Cornell University. She has suggested last year about, instead of using ontologies or taxonomies to classify the legal terminology or the law itself to have user-generated taxonomies. I won't go quite that far, but I'm heading in that direction. And this is a project that started, it's being done by some academics from University of London, I believe, and University of Chicago and University of Texas. Mostly political scientists and computer science. These are some of the things that have developed since I started doing this. When I started doing this, there was, and I still have trouble explaining what I'm going to do. But when I started this, it wasn't really relevant to anything but legal translation. And I didn't, that's a tough market. But then I learned about the, I was watching the TED website, and I saw this video. First time I got this video about Ken Berners-Lee, the next web, and I thought, that sounds really cool. A year later, I took an online MOOC from the Hassel-Plattner Institute, it's called OpenHPI, about semantic web technologies. It was in English, and they're offering another one, starts next weekend. Open data is something I see as an opportunity or an application of what one is planning. And I mentioned earlier about the C Corps and the social network. The bad news about this project is there's no way to really, it doesn't really work as conventional physics like my former employer lets us know. And one example of an organization that promotes something you could consider legal literacy would be here in Montreal, Education. And more websites that deal with law are beginning to use linked data. But next, these are what I see as the next task. And one of the key tasks that I'm developing is a definition of legal literacy. And a lot of that is some things are relevant, like something called information literacy now, and there's the digital divide. It's kind of an unconventional, I suppose, definition, but it's really, like law itself, it's broader than just the formal law. And in order to make this work, and probably in a wiki, by developing common denominators among legal terminology that are not bound to a single language of literacy. Pretty much, this is what I'm thinking. When I was taking the online course, when the light bulb came on, when they started talking about the Wikipedia knowledge box and how DBpedia takes the information from the knowledge box and creates another database. I think the people in doing Constitute actually use DBpedia. And these are some of the other advantages I see from the media wiki concept, or as this word, the media wiki sort of theme. Even got some cool logos. And we deal with something with law, you've got to have a disclaimer. Yeah. And you can infer I'm not disclaiming anything that's not listed. And this is my contact. Me contacting my most efficient manner. Are there any questions? Yes.
So how many data have you already captured?
I haven't started doing it yet. I haven't done the wiki. And that's why I'm here, because it's something that I think needs to be done, but it needs to be done in a manner that works. And I don't know how to make it work yet. So that's what I want to start studying now. And that's one thing about which I've learned a lot this week. And that's why I'm making my the common and non-measures pretty simple.
But still, you might look for a legal fight in the analysis, something like that. Do those things exist?
The company in Montreal and technologies that takes new legal briefs, that's information, but they have a mix of like and that is also created by experts, and it also localized content. It helps people to stay up to date with the laws, and can't just edit them, so they can just keep processing.
That sort of thing can become very relevant.
Yeah.
But it is important to not to have the illusion that you're going to capture all the information, because that's impossible. You won't capture all the relevant data ever in any system, but you can capture a lot. You can develop, I guess you would call it a corpus, in other words. They're doing some work in Europe. I think it's the European University Institute. A guy named Giovanni Sartori.
You're going to find a lot of different individuals that are doing work in this field, and you really have to find your own direction.
Yes. And that's something I need to develop.
Or fundraising drives that are maybe a regional version or where big audience can use anyone with logic go fields.
Yeah. That's a great thought. And when I talked to one of the guys, Ron Cicada, who's doing the Constitute project, one of the things he emphasizes, that stuff, they want people to use that stuff. They want people to reuse it. So that kind of spirit is beginning to develop in law. I didn't know that 5 years ago, but now circumstances have made what I'm doing more probably to become relevant. But thank you. Any more questions? Yes.
One suggestion after this is start with, I think, start with this sort of figure a little bit more, it would be like drawing from parents.
Even the head possibly doing it in public 27, but I think it's probably that they're on political law, total one. Yeah, and but all the world can be said. The only thing is the way that you can be to political people that have sensitive or
Well, I'm actually going to kind of turn that upside down. My approach is that legal terminology is a subject area in itself. In other words, just like extracting legal terminology, consider it in the abstract, not in particular context. But that would become relevant because if you say, like, have a website with all the different legal terms in all languages, you would you put links to the two different places where they are explained. But my chief concern is the homonyms, synonyms, or the translation equivalents, because none of that stuff is set in stone. No, I have not.
I know a lot of developers their extensions translate language, the interface extensions in multiple languages, often like millions, one language, but you upload their extension and translate use browsers and other folks who know that language will come in and help change that button that says submit to the global equipment and put that in code. I don't know if this is like that one.
And if you think of what I'm good friends with civil engineers on the site. Yeah. And they are always looking for new content.
Well, you don't mind if we want to.
Certainly.
Thank you.
So, great, thanks. So, we are almost at the end of the conference, but the most important of all sessions is still to come. So don't quite switch off yet. Can I use this computer? Is it?
Yeah, it's a console.
Oh. Yeah. Okay. So how does that work? Normally, at the end of SMWCon, we have a little session where people can make suggestions. Sometimes these are put into practice later on. Sometimes they are at least recorded or taken note of and may come to mind later if there's a possibility to realize them. What kind of suggestions do I talk about? So we have, of course, the conference itself. How did it go? What should we change in the future? Length, topics, formats we want to have, venues as well. I will probably start with this. But also suggestions, of course, regarding semantic media wiki as a whole. Also the community work that we do. We have you may not all know that, we have an association, Open Semantic Data Association, that is kind of helping to organize such events and managing financial resources, for example, that are left over from one event and using them to fund another one when maybe some of the planning is slightly off. So this is something we do, and we can do other things if people want so. And of course, we can also talk about software suggestions, which we haven't really done much for the future of semantic media wiki. But let me just bring up the web pages first, and then. Oh, I'm logged in as David here. Does that also work on other pages? Can I?
Also,
We are already here. Okay. So I made an Etherpad for that, so we can take notes if we want. But let me first start by telling you something about the next SMWCon. Let me start by, I already thanked the organizers, which I can repeat many times, but are already gone, so that was important. Personally, I would now also like to thank our sponsors, Concordia University and the Department of Engineering. That was a great support we have received here, and without these organizations, we certainly wouldn't be able to actually have such an event. So thank you. So, next thing is the upcoming Semantic Media Wiki conference. I have seen, well, to me, surprising number of people from Europe coming over here, which is great. So I hope to also see a surprising number of people from North America coming over to the next European one, maybe.
budget.
Budget. No, sorry, that's the wrong one. The one we already have almost finished. I mean, budget is one thing, but this is a location to not miss, I would say. So this is this will be held in Vienna, which is a great city, a beautiful city, and a touristically most appealing city as well, by coincidence. So if you can acquire any funding from your organization to go there, it will of course be most beneficial for you professionally, but might also have some nice side effects. So it's really beautiful place to visit, and I can only recommend it. So also the time is not too bad, October 1st to 3rd, so it's not quite winter yet. And then hopefully we can have a few nice days, but even if it's raining all day, there are such great restaurants and cafes and museums, of course, and many things to do. So it's definitely worth traveling. Okay, so this is the next one. Then another thing is the one after the next. We have talked vaguely about yet, so that would be again in North America, to possibly consider locating in St. Louis, which has a very active local community of many MediaWiki users with some very interesting applications, and there might be ways to get good locations, but we have to explore that. If anybody has feedback on that, comment on that, we could rather that now. Is that how would you like St. Louis as the location of the next North American market? Mark, putting thumbs up, that's good, yeah, thumbs up, okay. I mean, basically everybody who's against it has to make a counter proposal. Right? We can be very grateful to have people who are looking into this organization. So it would be, from my perspective, it would be very good if we can arrange that. This is not official yet. We have to look into the details, what the rooms are, what the budget is, if it all fits. But we would go forward and plan for that and see how it goes. It's still very early for this, so we will be really happy to have this 1 year in advance planning. Is really good for our normal planning. It's quite amazing. Okay, so these are the main general announcements I have now. Feedback. I have here this little feedback pad. The link is in the wiki, so you can also just write stuff there if you want. I would roughly distinguish here these two things maybe. So, SMWCon. How did you like it? Anybody wants to comment on it? Should we stick to that format? Should we make it longer or shorter? Should we try to condense it more? Any kind of ideas that would help to improve the conference further? Also, I mean, last time in fall we had a lot of discussions also comparing other events. So how do other people run their conferences? People more like open spaces, more lightning talks, more this kind of option, or what should be there. So if somebody has suggestions, feel free to make that.
Typically, every conference starts with a hands-on practice day. If you keep doing that and starting at the basics every time, at some point your audience is mature enough. So if they want to learn how to install a semantic media wiki, they can find out online or do it some other time. I thought that the 3 days of briefings was great. You could compress it a little bit more. I would say maybe an earlier week or Friday afternoon would be pleasant to do some of the training. I wonder if the training is still a necessity. Well, I thought it was useful myself, and I see maybe a danger of not having the elastic stretch too tightly between the new users and the experts. Yeah. I have the technical background. I studied computer science as well, so I can follow this stuff. Maybe not the case of presenting material, just made this presentation. So I would just okay. We did review not particularly
yeah, but I think that's a good point. So what should the future of the tutorial day look like? I think that's a valid question, that I have had similar concerns, because every year for every 6 months we are having the same basic introductions to the software. So maybe one could try to make something more specific there, maybe more hands-on, where people can really come with a particular problem and discuss it, or maybe try to look at something more specific. But we would need some concrete suggestions what people would like to see there in order to plan that, and also maybe even volunteers or suggestions on who to invite to do this type of presentation.
Maybe have in the first half of the day where there's multiple tasks, that the beginner session that if I have an existing wiki or I have a set up wiki, I want to understand concepts at a high level, sort of what is semantic web, what is typical, whatever sort of thing, like in that session. If I already have semantic media wiki, but I want to understand how I can build more complex task queries or what the greatest semantic extensions are that I go to that track. But at the same time, and there's an advanced one where I've got this great idea and I want to get Python code. It's been semantic media wiki. Can you come build a, I mean, you don't have to do something else. And that would be the tutorial they would be depending on your comfort level, your mistake. Have somebody like me, but I can definitely do some pretty basic things. I cannot do using the
Yeah, likely they to propose certain subjects would maybe
Anything else that on the application,
yeah.
you need a basic introduction, or are you able to get one person to give a basic introduction? They have class, so you've got 6 or 8, absolutely.
Yeah.
I was thinking about kind of my solution for that is to create something. And it's kind of what we're planning on doing, that in fitness and conference field, we have this informal space where we break out, and people can, like, if Matt was still here, you could ask Matt about all these specific questions he had about coding, which for me, I would be completely silent at because I wouldn't be able to offer any guidance. But if we're talking about how to build communities around the way we usually meant to do before that, that would be something that I would be more prone to. So breakout sessions.
One could have breakouts with repetitive buttons where you can say, okay, we are interested in building community, we have similar problems, and we want to like put together, not with one person speaking to the other, but discussing solutions. So that would be an interesting thing. Yeah. Well, maybe we should consider that.
I also don't think it's a bad idea just to have some level of knowledge kind of required to come. I mean, if people really need a basic understanding of semantic media, there's several YouTube videos out there. There's just like a couple things you can just watch video before you come and just at least have a foundation. So, for most of the people, especially, there is 1 or 2 people that say that, you can just send them a link.
Yeah.
Have the space to answer those questions, but not take up a section of going over those things.
Or in that case, maybe just give a beginner's package when you register. Send a list of links, or
very important to make people feel welcome. That you don't make them less. That everyone knows about it, heard about it.
Yeah. I mean, something that we have tried to do more on the European side, where we have more developers is to run the tutorial day as a tutorial and developers day in parallel. But I must say also this didn't always work out, because often enough the people who are giving the tutorials are the developers, and so they are not available to sit in a hacking day in parallel. But in fact in Berlin we had 2 parallel sessions on that day, even with several.
yeah, and a lot of what we're talking about kinds of problems. So I was willing to probably open this maybe 1 or 2 more people in the mark.
Yeah. Okay. I think also maybe in general the European conference is running differently than the North American one, because already off-site, and so some things that work on one side may not work so well on the other, so we have to keep that at home. here's the feedback we got in fall for the European conference. Mostly unsorted, really. At this conference, it was also felt we should have more time for breaks because it was a very dense program. We had so many people participating there, and I think for here we had quite good space in the breaks to discuss things. So that was something I appreciate. So that was really nice. Of course, one could still have more like organized discussions about a certain topic, but then one would have to also in the organization already have a room allocated for this or something like that. So it's not something we can just say we want to do now and sit here in one corner of the lecture hall. But I think it worked very well what we did here. We had some of these remarks already in the past conference.
I was going to say, from the last in New York, is there tournaments like keeping going or is there walking on
Yeah. Okay, I mean, this is a general thing. I think one way we can try to improve that further is to ask for more input before the conference. So to help people to organize such things, so that we want to have this, we have to do it before the conference or at the beginning of the conference, maybe in a special session to gather this kind of input. What would somebody like to discuss and then make space for it? Okay, but still, I think it went fairly well this time, so I didn't really miss anything there, or especially I didn't miss the time or space to do such a question. Something we also have discussed in past discussions of this time is timing, and this is always a big issue when we plan the next SMWCon. What days of the week are good for this kind of event? And we have always some people who say, if it were on a weekend, then I could come, but because I'm not professionally doing that, I can't just come on a Thursday or Friday. And honestly, I would never come on a weekend. I have family, I'm traveling here, and this is my job. I'm not going to do that on the weekend. And of course, it's always biased when you are in a conference which has happened during the week. Most people are the ones who can come on a weekday and may not be the ones who can come on the weekend. Any feedback on that?
So what kind of people are you trying to attract? The audience or the question?
Well, that's exactly the point. I didn't both. I mean, we often have both on the conference. Sometimes the quarter is partly true if there's somebody who is self-employed. Yes. So ideally, we would like to have both of this. And the question is then, should we have one day on the weekend and 2 days in the week? That would also be an option. But yeah, I mean, if there's anybody who has particular feedback on that, it will be a pressing question again when we want to find a day for it.
Then you have to arrange it so if you have one day on the weekend and the rest of the week, you have to figure out what to put on the weekend. So that, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Consider your audience.
You want to have the more community-focused things on the weekend and more business-focused things on the weekend. Yeah, I think the Vienna one had a weekend overlap, I think. Or maybe not. Yeah, okay, so that's more like following up after the conference and trying to engage some people. Okay, so well, no specific inputs you want?
Have you ever had one where like a specific theme or a question around the interview, or it's not really general? Because I was talking about my book earlier. You're quite a bunch of, you are quite a bunch of smart people around it. I think I'm like,
Not yourself,
and how I was saying is how to, it's the art of mobilizing collective intelligence. And we do share a lot. And my question is, how could we go to the next step for ourselves? In all of those things, we plan hardest when we plan a meeting. And sometimes there's a very deep and meaningful question that comes with the invite. Right now, I see there's like lots of presentations in place in the user pages and stuff like this. But how could we organize ourselves when we meet together to produce knowledge about this knowledge that we share together?
And to say it's not enough to just record our talks and have our slides available online. That's not the type of knowledge production.
It's quite good already. It's a very, very interesting website. But maybe we would like to or tend towards producing semantic knowledge about our talks. So these talks are valued and easier to access when we need them. So we have lots of very good, I've seen lots of very good technical documentation on semantic methodology and on leadership. And quite easy. But for the soft skills around the SMWC, that would be that's what is something.
Okay, that maybe that ties in with the birth of the feather or the outbreak kind of sessions where we could have somebody like a task force who is interested in certain soft issues, for example, and really produces a kind of statement or a result of the discussion instead of just collecting slides of people. It could actually be interesting to consider that. Not quite sure what I should write. If you'd like to write something.
I would say kind of projects. We are gardening our wiki, but when we need to get what can we projects of our practice to help each other on different levels. We shared lots about this technical app or this minister of God we did, and there was this thing when I get in my professional context, it's still quite hard to demonstrate the ROI on the thing. So we probably have different questions that we try to answer on our common practice, and then we make sure we could have dialogue around these.
So, first, the company Matt Paul and I work with is hosting it's a knowledge sharing summit, which I guess is focused around the booth, that collects the fuel and more people. Is that something that would be of interest to other people? I mean, I heard that repeatedly in here, about how do we make people engage in our week.
I think there are a lot of websites that are focusing on development of the wiki and the development of extensions, but are there also websites for user feedback or for sharing user solutions of software, like making things that I did with building a meta model, or things that Miter did with their wiki farm and their review extension, stuff like that, and we can share with the user community. Is there a platform for the media with the user community?
Maybe that's something that this foundation did, because it looks like the semantic media or is already doing this.
Yeah, I mean, to some extent, of course, with the SMWCon, we want to gather these things, have people invited or encouraged to report about that, and keeps this information available. So the idea with the talks we have, I mean, you can find all the talks of recent SMWCons, usually with recordings and with slides, and with abstract and title on our wiki. The question is, could we maybe organize that even better to, for example, flesh out things about user issues, about community building. So maybe we should tag this in a certain way. But
maybe create a portal or a page on semantic media with the website that will gather all the information and give results. And in addition to that, maybe at the next conference we could say, okay, well, if somebody comes up with a example that other people are interested in, you can directly ask them to post information about it in a certain format on the website.
I was going to say you can have semantic prompts so that the talks themselves are semantic.
Well, they are already on our wiki
with some content specific.
Yeah, the main thing is we would need to have some content tags, so you don't just organize talks by event where they were given, but by topic that they had, and then you could filter by that, and have a filter with all the talks about. That would be interesting, yeah.
Kind of user best practice.
So I'm not depending on the business part that I got from Bernadette and Cynthia, but okay, doing everything. Okay, that's the thing that I want to be in the list of best practices, but make sure it's on the website and we all can look at it.
You can try some NLP combining this from existing talks. And add the markup automatically.
If you have the technology, we have the website.
We do the summer stream or something like this. That work on this.
I mean, the number of talks is small. I think in the time that you can develop a tool to talk, that you can rather attack that.
Right. Fun at that.
I will welcome any contribution there. Also, I should say at this point, the person who's keeping this webpage together and organizing the site over is Carsten Hoffner in Berlin. So he's really doing a great job, and maybe he can also be involved in this discussion, which is about organizing things on the website. He's like the editor-in-chief of this whole website. Okay, I'll leave it at that. Good. Okay, great. That is a nice idea. Community outreach, anything else we should do that? So I have three sections here, right? So the SMWCon we already have discussed, and if you have anything else, please say. Community work and outreach is usually a general topic. Should we involve more people? Should we go to other conferences and talk about human media? Should we have user meetups? Who is doing that? This type of stuff, and of course also technical issues are something we can discuss. I can show you what we had in the past there. So people had strong feelings about community and promotion info, so they were making many suggestions. I'm not sure what exactly came of that. There was a suggestion to organize meetup groups. I think Samuel Lampert did some of this, but I don't know what the status is, whether they live. Do you know anything?
I helped register it after
Yeah, so that is certainly a possibility, but of course you need enough local people to do that. In New York, we once had that. I think that was already difficult.
Something that would be helpful, I think, maybe more in the corporate world where money is always an object for the way we work, I guess. Selling points for has this ever been discussed?
You mean specific activities for the corporate?
No, not necessarily, but selling points to introduce this kind of technology in the workplace.
Oh, good. What is the financial ROI? I shared this because this was the point that was about to say.
Yeah, I think this has been brought up a lot, but we are not going to do it as OSCA. That I can say. I mean, we don't have the capacity or really the mandate even to pursue business solutions. But we are very happy if somebody wants to do that and wants to make that a bit more organized.
What I meant is more about the success stories in the workplace.
Yeah, I mean, actually, we have the testimonials page on the wiki, which was a bit targeted in that direction. And many people in the community care strongly about that, like Jaron and others who are also doing businesses with that. So Hello Bell is also doing business with MediaWiki. So having some way of bringing the business people together in a better way would also be nice. And our infrastructure can support it, but we can't, as OSCA, it's not something you can really further very much because it's not credible if we do that as a kind of association. It has to come from the people who actually provide the service. Another example is on the wiki we already have this work for hire page where people can register themselves as freelancers who offer services. So we have these types of pages. So if somebody has an idea how to make additional pages to advertise this whole ecosystem more to businesses, then this would definitely be well.
I think for the next take a look at all the past cookies of the month. People who are active for their business, people who have businesses around supporting posting.
Yeah.
But also, I think the one these wikis invite people to talk, not from a technical perspective, but from a here's how we got this to work.
Yeah.
Non-large not because any technology stuff putting it together in the organization, the politics of the organization.
Yep. Yeah, that's a good idea, yes. Wiki of the Month, of course, is an important outreach and community activity as well, which we want to keep up. So, and in general, it's not easy to find a wiki every month, which provides a nice showcase. So, if you have a thing and if you would like to promote it there, even if it's not public, if you can share some screenshots and experiences, that would be always a good idea. So just step forward and send us an email, and we'll get in touch. Okay.
Marcus, I have a question. Did I understand you correctly to say what's the name of the SMW nonprofit is not really focused on gathering stories and or how media wiki is really helpful?
Well, no, the OSCA, the community, the organization behind that is a charity with its main purpose being to foster the sharing of open data and knowledge and free information. And as such, we support the infrastructure in MediaWiki and MediaWiki in general, and also in their business applications. But we can't really promote in a strong way as our main part, because we are not quite the right organization for this. So, but I mean, experience reports, all kinds of testimonials, we are happy to share, but we try to keep the charitable work which we can do what top down, so to speak, apart from the community work, which is also maybe some kind of commercial interest in the fund interest.
I would love to know, I would love to have short, really short lightning presentations around what extensions you're using alongside how are you integrating something like string data or just how are you using semantic maps? I understand how semantic maps work and your documentation, but it's become a promise, it's a real world example of another people using semantic maps. So it doesn't have to be half an hour long, here's how semantic maps work, just an example. Help me think of ideas how I would think about that.
Yeah.
Those things are exactly semantic maps.
Would it help to have more teams session or announcement from like you're going to have half an hour with writing codes and how many people can use so that instead of after the session one and after the session two, or we're going to have a session on digital audios or a session on developing the
yes, you mean yes, I kind of agree with that. Yes, if there are enough talks on one topic to bundle them in one session, I think it makes sense to do that. Sometimes difficult, like in this last session, for example, we had a mixture of topics, which was also because the short-term planning of the talk. So the last one was actually a lightning talk, and it was the only lightning talk anybody proposed for this conference. So maybe if we had more of this, that would be really good. And I think in Europe we tried that, where we had a lot more talks. We tried to really bundle them by topic, also to allow people to skip a session maybe and have a breakout meeting in parallel if they are really more interested in it.
I think it's also you don't want to put people into little boxes right away.
Yeah.
Maybe you have to announce it beforehand. Talks on this. And
Okay.
then people might think, oh, this is really that maybe I don't have any checks on this matter. Oh, yes, I am actually.
That's a good idea. Yeah, topics of interest also to inspire people to say, oh yes, I can say something on that, which would really make sense. Yeah,
Definitely, because often when we register what are our topics or extensions of interest, what are our questions that we have to ourselves.
What about the application form? Ask more about what's your level of experience?
Yeah. So you take this information in form on the user page, but then hard to for people that have the understanding content.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, that's also a timing issue, of course. I don't know at what point in time most people have registered. So of course, if people register very late in some specified topics, it's difficult to find to build any program from that.
If we cannot use it to do the programmation, we still browse it while we are and meet people because
Okay.
Isaac might have a question that I have the answer, but I have a different to talk about this topic. And I will suggest a little checking session, half an hour, sharing our names all the time, while we do.
That's a good idea. For this size of meeting, this would definitely work. For the last one in Europe with 80 people, it would be a very
When we are big group, we just divide ourselves into a group of 35 or something like that. And then the check-in is not overall, but at least we get to know more people.
Let me also highlight something here. There will be a survey as already indicated, so you will maybe receive an email. There is a post-conference survey where you can answer some multiple choice questions on other things. So there's also this opportunity to give feedback. Okay. Any other things that could be?
Just thinking, if you'd like to information people are interested about their kind of level of experience, one of the things I was thinking about is, what should I include in the talk? Like Joe asked me, who knows about RDF? Where should I have that section and explain the RDF in that? So, if people were able and if you're able to circulate that to speakers, then they would better learn how to pitch the level.
Difficult because we have very wide topics. So RDF is maybe one of the more usual suspects where you can ask about, but I think many of the other topics we have, you can always assume that one third of the audience doesn't know about it because we have such a mixed community.
See some friends, like there's always one third of the audience that know nothing about RDF, following along supporting to a still session about RDF that really
like we're saying things here as a
every single time.
I mean, that would be something for the tutorial day, I guess. By the way, that also brings up the issue of how wide the topic of the conference should be or how narrow. I mean, I have talked a lot about Wikidata this time, which I consider to be quite related, but of course one could say SMWCon, where's the SMW in that? So, in past events, we also had people from other media wiki-based projects, or even just wiki-based projects that were not related to media wiki at all, present about their semantic stuff. I think people appreciate that in general, but maybe not always. So if you feel that the topic should be wider or more or narrower, there's also something to discuss it. Yeah. So in my point of view, right always is good as long as it still has some relationship, and especially all the community issues, they are often quite independent of the technology. Any other business? I see some people already have to go for the airport.
Some people already left.
Yeah. Yeah. So don't feel obliged if you are in a hurry. I think we are almost done anyway. So,
well, yesterday we briefly talked about looking into co-locating SMWCon. There could be either something like Wikisim, OpenSim, or maybe some academic conferences.
I must say I wouldn't like the academic co-location because I think they are so busy. These big conferences, they have so many workshops and tutorials around. It's often very hard for people to go to anything else. But one could still think about it. So co-location, is that something we should? It's probably not for the next year, but maybe in the future should we approach other events and put our event next to them, which will of course influence the day of the week we can get. Often it will be a weekend if we co-locate. And it will also influence the space, the location, and everything else. But it might also simplify some things if they already have a conference planned, then we don't have to organize everything. But it brings up the question which community we want to go with. Like it's the volunteers, the hackers, the business people, the people. That was so far.
didn't have that. Any suggestions?
Pardon my ignorance here, but are there other conferences that feel focused on third-party reviews? I mean, Wikipedia conferences usually allow for the speed. So it would be good to go to, but you have to be a lot of traction, everybody's like, oh, I can't do that.
Well, so a few years ago in Japan, they co-located Wikimania and WikiSim, which is not focused on. It wasn't not focused on.
Yeah, so I guess WikiSim could be a candidate because it's a general wiki event. Wikimania, probably not again because it's so busy already around it. There's a hacking day and everything, and it's hard to find time for 3 days of event. Also, all of this might affect the cost. Wikimania is quite cheap. ISWC and ESWC are quite expensive, so this is a whole different category of conference. So you will have a different audience. If you co-locate there, you will have much higher fees for entrance. So,
well, see, let's turn it on its head. We as a community, send somebody this may be that we have a presence at these conferences. We all can't go, that would suck, but at least somebody should be there talking about mandate reading. So I heard about the mandate reading because it's on mandate reading in work. I never heard about the other ones or saw it from out as opportunities to talk about some mandate reading. If the opportunities arise, I would definitely argue with my supervisor or if it's going to fly and push the level. Give a tap on the talk about the conference and
yeah, so that goes for me under community outreach, send people to conferences. Yes, in principle we can do that. We can ask people or try to find people to give a talk. If we have a target conference where we say this is there, we should really be present. For the semantic web conferences, I wouldn't see that as a priority because first, A, people there know that stuff already, and B, they are focused on research, and it's really hard to sell it as research. It's an application, you can do something with it, but it's not there's no research in it. You have to do the research. You can't just send somebody because you think it's good to hear about it. Then there are hacking conferences, a lot of them, open source conferences, where it's much more community building, and you can try to get into it. Sometimes we had people there. Yaron was at Boston like this, and yeah, of course, we also have sometimes the opportunity to talk about Wikidata because we are invited. There were some a number of conferences where I talked about this at Media, so we could also couple that with this more community. But yeah, in general, we have to say which conferences should that be, and then we can try to make people go there, and maybe even support it as OSCA. That would be conceivable in certain cases.
Use the name of the list on the website, post share an opportunity. XYZ conference is coming up. We'd like to go. We encourage you.
Yeah, as I said, the main thing from my perspective is somebody has to say which conferences are important, and then we can discuss whether they are important for us or not. But so far, I don't have a specific proposal there where I can say, oh yeah, this is a conference we always miss out on, and we have someone. So maybe we can say, I mean, I can see actually talking about community outreach, but I see things like Tiki or Tiki. They have a lot of publicity. It's not enough apparently for me to distinguish Tiki and Tiki, which is a bit confused in my mind right now. But one of these has a very good publicity, and I have a lot of t-shirts from them. And because they are a conference, because they invest there. But maybe it's just what it is. Okay, anything other things? So, something that I have marked up here from the last discussion is actually that I seem to have said, maybe we also need to think about how we work in the media or be a bit out of Wikipedia and to support it somehow. Not sure if it was the new market or another market there, but I think this is of course for us an important thing, and I've seen many people have already enlisted on your webpage for this media organization. So that could also be a question for us. Should we, as an organization, rather than as a person, engage more with this effort and try to kind of support it in some way?
Yeah, you should.
Yeah, you have to tell us how, and then we can decide whether we can do that or not. We don't have developers employed or anything, so that's
No, but
we can endorse it.
well, just my initial conversation with you about your ideas about how the content and the architecture is applied, that was a great insight.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of potential there. On the other hand, of course, if you shouldn't give the impression that your effort is mainly supported by the media community.
No.
That could again polarize. We don't want that. I mean, we wish you best of luck in all the different types of media we use. Okay, but that would be something to consider as well. Okay. So, any other business? Any other comments? Then, okay, very good. Thanks again for everyone attending here. Thanks to the organizers, and see you next time in Vienna, hopefully. And maybe Vienna can see it,
All right. That's the official end, I guess. That's the last of an understanding. I would also like to say thanks everybody for coming to Montreal, attending the conference. Would have liked to talk more to people, but organizing a conference involves lots of running around. So get up to get more exercise, organize SMWCon. And I hope I'll see you at one of the next conferences. Enjoy Montreal and have a good trip back home. You're welcome. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for your work. Sorry.
Pleasure.
And thanks for the cultural experience.